Anister had been absent from that room not longer than 10 racing seconds. It was unthinkable that the girl had vanished of her own volition, even had it been physically possible. Glancing around the room, he saw that the windows were closed and bolted. The flooring was solid, substantial. There could be no ingress save by the door through which he had just come. There was another door. It led to the next room, but Anister, with a habit of inbred caution, had tried it and found it locked. Now, in 2 swift strides, he had covered the space between, had tried that door, setting his weight against it as he turned the knob. Under his weight, it gave outward with a sudden slatting clatter. They, whoever they might be, had unlocked it. It had been through this adjoining room that they had taken the girl. Anister, glancing swiftly around this room, saw that it was obviously unoccupied. The bed had been made up. There was no sort of clue that he could see. The invisible assassin had a key. That was it, of course. But as to the rest of it, Anister could only speculate. It was an impasse and a mystery. Going downward to the dining room, as it was now past noon, he glanced toward the desk, but if he had had any thought of reporting the attack upon the girl or her disappearance, he thought better of it. He would keep his own counsel. A decision held by a sight of Lunn, the hotel proprietor, who, lounging at the desk, raised his sleepy-lidded vulture gaze at Anister as the latter was turning toward the dining room. Anister, in that brief glance, thought to detect in those eyes, milky pale, a veiled, sardonic flicker. If, behind this latest happening, there was the fine Italian hand of Hamilton Rook, Lunn was in cahoots with the lawyer. Of that there could be little doubt. For, as Anister was convinced, there had been a menace in those eyes half turned to his, an insolence, a bright burning truculence that, as he turned into the long dining hall, brought the swift blood to his cheek in a dark tide. But at his table another surprise awaited him. Mary Allerton was gone. The heavy-handed Swede who served him told him that she had left suddenly that morning. A message had come for her, it appeared, but the substitute could tell him nothing further. Anister let it go at that. Rising from the table, he went outward to the long bar, a cool, pleasant oasis indeed, in the fierce heat of the drowsy afternoon. He greeted the bartender, a tall man with the white shoulders of a cowman, with a smile. The man had been friendly. In fact, he had been the sole friend that Anister appeared to have made since his arrival in Tribone. Now the bartender leaned forward, speaking in a whisper behind his hand. "Watch your step, Mr. Anister," he said. Anister gave an almost imperceptible nod. Then, his drink before him upon the stained and battered mahogany, he glanced sidewise along the rail to where, at the far end, 2 men stood together, eyeing him under lowered brows. To Anister, it seemed that there had fallen a sudden quiet. Just prior to his entrance, he had heard talk and laughter, the clink of glasses, a thick, turgid oath. Now there appeared to rise and grow a tension, as of something electric in the air. Anister felt it in the white face of the knight of the apron, the sudden silence, the rigid figures of the 2 men at the end of the long bar. Behind him, a little to his left, 3 men were seated at a table. Bristow, sheriff of Tribone, a big man with a bleak, pale eye, and a mouth like a straight gash above a heavy chin barbered to the blood. With him were 2 other men whom he did not know. Lunn was nowhere in sight. The taller of the 2 men standing at the bar turned, and Anister recognized him as Tucson Charlie Westervalt, a gunman with a dangerous record. Westervalt was wearing a high-crowned white Stetson. Anister marked it at the distance. Beneath it, the fierce, hawk-like face turned now in his direction, the thin lips set stiffly in a sullen pout. The Old West had passed with the passing of the remuda, the trail herd, the mining camps, and the wide, free range of the long-horned cattle was no more. But Tribone had not changed, save that the loading pens had gone. A cow would be a curiosity, but the lawless spirit of the ancient West remained. Southwest of the law, indeed. Tribone was a law unto itself. And now about him Anister felt the menace. It appeared that he had walked into a trap. The judge, the sheriff, what mockery of law there was! Anister knew that it would be against him either way, attacking or attacked. He was certain of it as Westervalt, moving slowly along the bar, halted when perhaps 3 paces distant, elbow raised, right hand extended, claw-like, in a stiff, thrusting gesture above his guns. It was a gesture of the killer, the preliminary for the lightning down thrust of the stiff fingers. Anister knew that well enough. Now the gunman's gaze, sleepy-lidded like a falcon's, bored into his. His voice came with a snarling violence. "Mr. Black Steve Anister," he said without preamble, "I understand you're some wizard with a canister, eh? A bad hombre. Must have been a little bird done told me. And that bird was sure loco, I'll tell a man. But me," his tone hardened to a steely rasp, "I'm not thinking you're such a much." It was a trap. Anister knew that now, just as behind the gunman he could almost see the dark face of Rook with its sneering grin. The lawyer had inspired it. His automatic hung in a sling under his left armpit, but even if he could beat Westervalt to the draw, he knew well enough what the result would be. A shot in the back, say from the men sitting just behind, or arrest and the mockery of a trial to follow it. Either way, he was done. His own eyes held the gunman's now, glancing neither to the right nor to the left. He was conscious of a movement from the three men at the table. Westervalt's companion, a short, tall-legged man with the pale eyes of an albino, had stepped backward from the bar. Anister felt rather than saw his hand move even as his own hand came up and outward with lightning speed. Flames streaked from his pistol with the motion. Once in a generation, perhaps, a man arises from the ruck who, by an uncanny dexterity of hand and eye, confounds and dazzles the common run of men. As a conjurer throws his glass ball in air, swifter than eye can follow, so Anister, crouching sideways from the bar, threw his bullets at Westervalt. The gunman, bending forward at the hips, crashed to the sawdust in a slumping fall, as the albino, firing from the hip, whirled sideways as Anister's second bullet drilled him through the middle. For the 10th of a second, like the sudden stoppage of a cinematograph, the tableau endured. Then Anister, whirling, had covered Bristow where he sat. The two men with him, white-faced, hands pressed flat upon the tabletop, stared, silent, as Anister spoke. "You saw Bristow?" he said, low and even, his eyes upon the cold eyes of the sheriff in a bright, steady, inquiring stare. "Now, what about it?" For a moment a little silence held. Then Bristow, moistening his stiff lips, nodded, his gaze upon Anister in a sudden, dazed, uncomprehending look. "All right, Mr. Anister," he said heavily. "They came looking for it, I reckon." "Well, you were that quick." Anister smiled grimly, pocketing his pistol. Westervalt lay where he had fallen, a dead man even as he had gone for his gun, lips still twisted in a sullen pout. The bow-legged man, stiff fingers clutching his heavy pistol, lay face downward in the sawdust. The bartender, with an admiring glance at Anister, leaned forward as Bristow and the two men with him went slowly out. "They may try to get me for it, Mr. Anister," he said, "but I'm no man's man. Well, not Rook's, and you can lay to that. Bristow and his friends kept out of it, you noticed? Bristow will do nothing now. Not yet a while at any rate. But maybe they sort of savvied me a-watching to see they didn't run no whiz on you." He lifted the heavy Colt where it had lain hidden by the bar rail, thrusting it in its cupboard with a grin. "Well, sir, I aim to see that they were sitting close and quiet, Mr. Anister," he said. "Thanks, old-timer," said Anister. "I'll not forget." But as he went outward into the waning afternoon, he was thinking of that rendezvous of the night. For Rook would be there, and it had been Rook, he was certain, who had engineered that ambush in the mansion house bar.